Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Şükrücan. I approach resilience in a different manner, I want to focus on the problematic use of technology. So, to have this simply, I want to talk about the presentation, its history, and its clinical approach, and following that, to focusing briefly on what is resilience. I mean, it was being discussed before. We see its resilience as a coping mechanism, its developing program, especially including games as escapism, tech use as a coping strategy and mechanism, and its reflections in clinical level. Okay, so to give you a brief history, internet has entered, in our everyday lives, maybe late, but it was invented in 62, essentially as a United States network for military communication, a rapid communication system here to have the much more primitive level of internet. 72, it became multinational. 79, BitNet, the primitive version of the internet of today. And 91, we have World Wide Web to have the internet of today. Okay, in terms of technology and gaming, even though they are not fit to our current description, but computers go all the way back to 20th century's beginnings. We see some basic functionalities, but roughly, electronic computers come to late 50s. In terms of games, first game is in 1958. This analog device here, does the pointer work? This is an analog computer, and the first game was called Tennis for Two. Again, in 62, essentially, in our meaning, the first PC game was Space War. And 71, first commercially produced PC games were developed. Of course, computers get widespread. This doesn't work either. Okay. 71, commercial side app appears and this sector develops. Again, they are not computers of our understanding, but Ataris, Game Boys, and more are primitive computers, essentially. And from 90s onward, the computers, the personal computer in our houses are on the rise. And in late 2000s, we see social media emerge. And in the following, we had mobile phones and tablet computers widespread. And we see social media has grown to this catastrophic level of use today. So, in DSM criteria, there's no clear definition. The closest one to DSM is, disorder, internet gaming disorder. I mean, we all know, but to briefly cover up, we play a lot of games, feeling symptoms, when abandoned, resilience, distancing from other activities, developing problems based on gaming, continuing gaming, ignoring and lying when it comes to, quote, monitor time, having a guilt, negativity, and other emotions, and to cope with them using games. And in addition to playing games, having occupational or social life losses or difficulties are DSM's most basic criteria. Okay, in IGD, we see risk factors here, a meta-analysis. Before COVID, because the COVID has impacted this massively. In meta-analysis, IGD's risk factors, male, having depression, impulsivity, anxiety, high level of stress, having high level of gaming time, having a motivation for, and quote, escape as a method of distancing, and excessive use of social media networks are the main risk criteria.
ileri dönemlerdeki oyun oynama bozukluklarının yordayıcısı olarak güncel emosyonel problemler ve
And current screen times, especially in the 2 years, that the upcoming 2 years, were the verification points. While resilience conception was explained really well, but briefly we can talk about how to manage successfully with the negative events and the risk existence and the processes that could end in a negative manner without any loss. Could be an explanation. Of course, in the literature, there isn't any exact consensus in means of resilience. If you check out the relation between the behavioral addictions and resilience, there are a lot of studies that have been made, especially in the last 10 years. Those studies are persistently providing a negative correlation between resilience and two. There are many studies from different centers, and it is confirming the negative correlation. But in the behavioral addiction, there's a major definition called gambling. There is again different studies that showing no significant correlation between gambling addiction and resilience, and the resilience mechanisms relationship with problematic and digital use needs to be further studied. If we can say in a brief manner, the events coping skill with the negative events and the individual's resilience is the approach of coping with the negative events, and those coping mechanisms is actually categorized to three. Problem focused, emotion focused approaches is the one. It could be an approach of avoidance and cognitive acceptance. There is one thing that occurs right here. The individual's coping mechanism that they prefer is the main process. I would like to give one sample from this study. Stress coping mechanisms as the relationships with internet usage, and it was studied in this study, especially restraint coping, limitation coping mechanisms has a low correlation with internet usage, but mental avoidance behaviors are existent in internet addiction individuals. Well, the thing is, the coping mechanism is the key point of this process, this resilience mechanisms process. What kind of a journey that it will have? It's a factor about this. So simply, I would like to give one sample and mechanisms flow chart. One person that having trouble of learning, 15 years old person will have academical problems, and in that kind of situation, when we check out the coping mechanisms, if it has an approach kind coping mechanism, this academical failure will be focused on, and this will end in a positive manner. But if it's the opposite, if this individual shows avoidance when that happens, if they're supposed to study, they will avoid that event. There will be a maladaptive coping mechanism, and it will make the problem bigger. But in a similar manner, if we have a stable description, like avoidance is bad as a coping mechanism, is not actually correct, because if we take another case, for example, this younger person could have a pathological feature that they're supposed to wait for that pathological report. Then they try to research it, read it, try to get an answer. What could it be? What could be done when there's a problem? Nothing will give the necessary answer before that pathology report comes in. If that approach kind coping mechanism could increase the mental complexity and the stress will be increased and it could act as a saboteur, and this individual will be approaching this event in a problematic manner. This avoidant coping mechanisms were existent. Maybe this case could be handled more calmly and probably it would be moving on. And in conclusion, in order to say that this mechanism is good and this mechanism is bad, we have to check out the cases case by case. Well, technology use itself as a coping mechanism, could it happen? That's the problem here. And with technology use, individuals has decrease in the negative emotion and increase in the pleasure and briefly avoid and bad events. So it could be disruptive and maladaptive approach, and this kind of studies are also showing the benefits, but in case of this distraction in the long term could provide a decrease in the resilience. Why is that this kind of problem occurs? It won't solve the underlying issue. It will just keep your mind occupied and it won't solve it exactly. You will just show an avoidance to the problem. All those factors are important. If this person using it as a brief avoidance, if another behavior could develop as using social media as an avoidance factor, so if it's being a maladaptive coping mechanism is also important. This is a very beautiful study methodologically. Internet is a mediator. I am actually summarizing this with this chart. So this child is facing a negative event using internet and have a brief relief. That's not solving the problem. In long term, it could turn into a maladaptive coping and emotional stress increases, and that adversity will grow and it will cause a comorbidity as depression. In the child psychiatric practice, technology usage are mostly not a problem brought to us as a problem. It is brought to us by the parents, but problematic technology usage is not the problem itself mostly, and it could be just maladaptive and disruptive coping mechanism. So we should consider that as well. If it's related to gaming, we have a concept called gaming escapism. It could occur as a coping mechanism. Gaming escapism review summary was created, and the motivation is the main factor. Technology usage is a coping mechanism, and at some point it needs a social community acceptance, etc. So partial delonelinization could occur, and if that individual is successful in the gaming, it could provide a successful result, a positive benefit. This is another study. Emotional regulation challenges could be a marker for the avoidance, and it could be related to the emotional negative events, and it could be a maladaptive coping mechanism. This is another study in daily life. The things that we face, these negative events has pros and cons. So problematic video gaming could be caused by that negative events. This is a very good visual that I like very much. I would like to share it with you. This is a profile description for an influencer Well, this gamer played this related the game 20,000 hours and 500 videos were created. Does the same thing every week, but the description was very beautiful. So actually, a certain population plays game and brief relief symptoms could be created with this, and it is this description shows us really well. We only talked about the negative stuff so far. What could be the positive benefit of this? Took an example. How much was has I mean I'm talking about this psychiatric experts. I mean, who can suggest to decrease the screen time and increase the social acts between inside the household? Really, surely we have to sometimes remove the negative events. It's like a shield, like an escape. So maybe a child could face more negative events, so it could act as a shield. Technology usage is actually a thing that could make that child have an acceptance in the population, so it could have a positive effect. Similarly, the individuals that plays strategy games has increased skills in the problem solving. So it should be evaluated in detail if that skills developed because of those gaming behaviors, or this gaming develops that kind of skill. I mean, we don't know about this. We are not sure. The comment message is very clear. We have to say that problematic technological usage. I mean, technology is good. We should allow it, or not. We are not giving that kind of a message. But every kind of problems that we live and the problems that the children have, the main focus that's supposed to be solved immediately. We have to understand the children's dynamics. Why do they use those screens, and how are they spending their time is very important, and how can benefit us, and pros and cons should be evaluated really well, and then they can understand if it's a problematic screen use. Because we can also do screen usage. I mean, sociophobic individuals that can't have conversations calmly and easily between their peers could have another social communication via technological screens. So we are maybe breaking that bond by cutting off screen usage. So this is why we should understand what do they do on the screen, what kind of applications do they like, and how much time do they spend on those applications is important. When you ask the parents, when they complain about their children's screen usage, when we ask the parents what do they do on the screen, they don't know. 3 to 4 of the parents doesn't know that. If we understand this, it would be much better clinically. Thank you very much for listening.